Chris Howe, will you come with me to spring? Will you come with me to spring? Chris Howe.
Thank you, fellow Toastmasters. I don't know if anyone noticed, but it was a long, cold winter this year. And one day, about 3 weeks ago, I looked out my front window and I saw bright sunshine out of my front steps. So I smiled and optimistically I stepped out the front door without even putting on a jacket first. Bam! I was hit by this wall of ice-cold Arctic air that sent me stumbling back into my living room, where I flopped down on my couch next to my 3-year-old son, Zachary. Well, Zachary was just about to watch his favorite episode of Curious George on TV. And coincidentally, this episode was all about spring. It was annoying, too, that it was all about spring after what just happened to me. But I sat down with Zachary, and the opening scene of this episode features Curious George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat. And they're singing and dancing their way through this brightly colored landscape of spring flowers. Well, meanwhile, I'm sitting there on the couch, and I'm shaking my head, and I'm mumbling and grumbling under my breath about what a long, cold winter it's been. Well, Zachary turned to me, and he said, "Daddy, will you come with me to spring?" It's amazing to me how the innocent words of a 3-year-old can sound so profound at times. There's a large maple tree in the back corner of our yard, and every year about this time, I celebrate the coming of spring with that maple tree. I step outside and I see the first hints of green on the maple tree, and I smile when I think of the many warm days ahead. But then I force myself to linger and truly appreciate the moment, because I realize that spring and summer, like the best years of our lives, often pass much quicker than we would like. For me, spring, with its new life and hope for the future, will always belong to my children. But summer, with its joy and laughter, will always belong to my mother. One summer day, my brother and I were playing in the backyard, watching my mother take laundry down off the outdoor clothesline. And one by one, she would take items off the clothesline, carefully fold them and put them in the basket at her feet. Our dog Ginger was sitting close by my mother's side, supervising the whole operation. And this went on for a while, but then my mother did something really strange. She took a clean white t-shirt down off the clothesline, but instead of putting it in her basket, she reached down and she stretched it over Ginger's head. And then she stuck Ginger's paws through the sleeves, and just like that, Ginger was wearing a t-shirt. But she didn't stop there. My mom took a pair of men's underwear down off the line and stretched that over Ginger behind. And she even had the foresight to put it on backwards so that Ginger's tail would stick out. But Ginger was delighted. She loved her new outfit. She ran all around the yard, barking and wagging her tail excitedly. And we, her human companions, laughed right along with her. But then, something startled the crows in the cornfield next to our house, sending them flying off in all directions. And Ginger's instincts, as a golden retriever, kicked in immediately. Her tail stopped wagging, and off she ran across the cornfield in pursuit of the crows, wearing her new outfit. I don't know how long she was down that day, but it was at least an hour, maybe 2 hours. And I like to think that somewhere out there, there's an old Vermonter sitting on a porch saying something to the effect of, "The strangest thing I've ever seen has got to be the time I was out walking in the field and a dog came running out of the corn. And I swear that dog was wearing human underwear." My grandmother was already in the autumn of her life when I first met her. And judging by the photographs she showed me on rainy days, she was born in a strange time when there was no color. Everything was in black and white. But I've seen through my grandmother's many stories about growing up on the farm in rural Vermont in the 1920s, that life was every bit as colorful back then as it is now. My grandmother was many things. She was a hard worker, but she loved a good game of cribbage, as do I. She was a great storyteller and an even better listener. And she was a great cook, and no one ever left her table hungry. Just when you thought you had eaten all that was humanly possible, plop, another big spoonful of potatoes would land on your plate. And only then would she say, more potatoes, honey? She was a kind and generous person. And yeah, she was a kind, generous person, but you wouldn't want to mess with her. And the teenager who lived up the street and shot at my grandmother's house with his BB gun one day, well, he learned that lesson when my grandmother ran out the front door and chased him all the way home. He was 15 and she was 75. One day my grandmother turned to me and said, I'm 90 years old. I cannot believe I'm 90 years old and I'm still so healthy. I hardly ever even get a sniffle. And I said, knock on wood, knock on wood. And she knocked on her head gently like this, pretending it was made out of wood. And then she said, 90 years is a good long time. I've lived a good long life, and I'm ready to go, and it's my turn. My grandmother was the only person that I've ever known who was so content with her life and free from regret that she wasn't even afraid to face her own death. 10 years later, she was 99 and 1/2 years old, and she was telling one of her many stories about growing up on the farm in the 1920s, and then she paused. It was like she was trying to think of some minute detail. Or I like to think maybe she saw her family the way they looked back in the 1920s. Well, Zachary's episode, Curious George, was rapidly winding up, and he turned back to me and said, this time with some worry in his voice, Daddy, will you come with me to spring? And I finally answered him, and I said, yes, Zachary, Daddy will come with you to spring. And then I added reassuringly, Daddy will always come with you to spring, even though I knew that last part was not quite true. Thank you.